Hey, welcome everyone. It's Cyndi Silva. I'm happy that you're tuning in. This is a episode of Metaphysical Wisdom, and I'm here with David Nichol. Hello, David.
Hey, Cindy, how are you?
Doing well and glad to have you on the show. And David is an astrologer and just really had a great experience attending and being part of a group he held space for. And I was really impressed with my experience and wanted to share David with all of you. David works with astrology in the context of social and collective healing. And particularly with the experience I've had with David, we've worked with the energy of Chiron, the archetype of Chiron. And that was just so helpful. And I've always been fascinated and curious about Chiron. And I work myself with people using astrology and human design and gene keys. And I wanted to start integrating Chiron more because those systems, human design and gene keys, don't necessarily integrate it, but it's easy to do when we know the placement of our Chiron. And I'm just really happy to have you. So thank you. And I'd love to have you share whatever's, yeah.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
it?
Well, good to be here. And maybe I could talk a little bit about Chiron and why we did that offering at that time. One of the things I love about astrology in general is that it gives you this wisdom that there are certain moments in time that are ripe for certain energies or certain practices, that are better at certain moments than others. And the reason we did that Chiron course that you were part of at that time, as you know, is because there was a very significant Chiron transit happening in the sky for everybody. There was a Chiron Jupiter conjunction that was here in early March, and it was operative for about a month or so. And so what that meant was there was this window of opportunity that we all had, everyone all around the world, for looking at our core wounds. Chiron being the wounded healer archetype, and its placement in our chart gives us very precise information about the nature of our core wound. And so at that time, with Jupiter, whenever Jupiter touches something, it brings expansion, and it is a blessing ultimately. So there was an opportunity there for us to really look at our core wounds more than ever, to bring them to the light and to bring healing, to bring integration of the Chiron aspect of each of us, which I find is so crucial in terms of anyone who's on a journey towards wholeness. Chiron is a key, because if you don't integrate your core wound, then you're basically spending much of your energy suppressing it, avoiding it, compensating for it, going around it. But until you go through it, when you go through it, then you can sort of stand on the ground, like you're not hoping that people don't see this core part of you that you are convinced is this makes something wrong about you. And so when we look at it directly, Chiron then opens up this possibility of living here for real and bringing through the core gift, the great gift that we have to bring. So that's why I find Chiron is pivotal, I think, in any path to wholeness.
Yeah, thank you. And you're really pointing at that there's an individual Chiron wound, and my sense is that you're pointing out there's a collective Chiron wound as well. And so I'm wondering if you would give us an example of what that might be, or maybe even for people that this is new for, what is a core wound, and how are we collectively, as we look at our own personal Chiron wound, healing that, contributing to the healing of the collective.
Yeah. Well, let's see, there's many ways to go with that, but um, the the teaching of Chiron in the chart, again, I find so helpful because the core wound that Chiron speaks to, it's the place that we all have where we feel that something is actually wrong with us. That we normally try to hide that part, but we think secretly if someone saw that part of us, they would see that yeah, they're not really up to it in some way. They're this is the part we tend to have a lot of shame around. And part of the benefit of astrology is you see everyone has Chiron somewhere in the chart. So it's not something wrong with you, objectively speaking, or you're not special in that way. It's part of the cosmic design. It's how it works. It's part of the story of the evolution of the human soul. Is we are given or stamped with this challenge, this wounded place, and it's not accidental. And when we how it works is because we're wounded in that area, we have to bring our attention there. We're just drawn there over and over again to try to figure out a solution because it's painful. And so we bring our attention there. We get creative there. And that's the gift side. Ultimately, what happens is through wrestling with that particular place, we access the something unique that we have to bring through to contribute that is very creative, very unique to us. That is our gift. And that's the magic of Chiron. Chiron does point to the wound. So there's the painful side of Chiron, but Chiron is very creative and is the mythology. Chiron is a demigod. So there is the divine side of Chiron that brings through these healing gifts. Um, and there's I think there's just nothing like it when you discover the gift precisely through going through the wound, then you have real authority because you haven't constructed something over the wound. It's emerged out of it, and you can stand in that.
Yeah, beautiful explanation. I really appreciate that depth. And I have this sense, like I've been tracking in my own work with individuals and my own life, that it's kind of like the imago therapy and relationship therapy, if you understand that. Like you will attract into your life a partner who will bring up your wounds so that you can see them and work with them, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's true too of our lineage, like where we come into this life and incarnate into a family of origin that has a core wound itself, like the genetics. There's a genetic weakness, for example, and our gift is attracted to that weakness, right? Like a healer is attracted to people that are hurting. And so we embed ourselves into that family system, and then our gift isn't seen or recognized because that family system is playing out the wound. So we identify with that wound and we take that wound on. And then when we turn and face that wound, we uncover that gift that we originally brought, which was to take the genetics in a new direction.
Totally. Yeah, that totally resonates. And the interesting thing about Chiron is you can also look at the charts of your family, your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, and see where their Chiron is placed. And often there are patterns that you can see. And again, that's where I find astrology helpful, is that say rather than just a generic sense, oh, I have a wound, I have a core wound somewhere, somehow, it gives specific information, right? Like if you have a core wound in your Chiron in Aries, it's going to be this very specific wound to Aries qualities like courage and self-assertion and that area. If you have a core wound in Libra, it will be different. It will be more in the realm of relationships, and so you get very specific information about where the wound is. But absolutely, that wound is embedded in these bigger fields. It's not just your own wound; it's the family wound, and then this is where you can, I think, go into the collective intergenerational stuff as well, because the family wound comes from somewhere too. These collective patterns, these inherited programs, these inherited traumas. So I find it helpful to see it that way rather than just thinking about it as our personal psychology.
Yeah. And then looking too at generations come in with the same core wound. And so there's generations of collective fields of humanity. So, like a vehicle for consciousness that takes up a whole generation to address a core wound that's in the collective. So, I see that, when you look at everyone born in the same year has the same Chiron wound. So they
That's
also have the same medicine. They have the same solution, if you will, to whatever problem exists that is their gift is the remedy for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we come in these cohorts somehow that are tasked with healing that particular wound. And maybe there's a meaning in that with our generation, it's like you figure it out together somehow. And yeah, so I mean, maybe just to say something about the collective aspect. I mean, it seems to me at this moment in particular, there is, as we're, astrologically speaking, in the collective, the big story is this shift that we're in between the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, right? And so that's a huge paradigm shift that we're all going through, and we're right at the cusp, I think, of that birth moment of the Aquarian age, which is to me why there is so much chaos and why we're seeing so much of the dying of the old ways and the old structures and so on. And so I do think that the healing work that we're doing at the moment, um, personally, obviously, it's very significant, but to understand it collectively, to understand it as part of our contribution to um, that great shift, because there's so much acting out of the wound at the moment. And to the extent that we can do that work for ourselves, I think it's a particularly powerful contribution at the moment. And it's as if consciousness, I think, is really going deep. I feel it's as if consciousness is accelerating, and it's flushing up a tremendous amount of stuff from the unconscious and from the shadow. And again, to me, that's why we see the outplay so thick at the moment in the collective. But for those of us on a path of transformation, it's actually an amazing opportunity, because you can go really far really fast at the moment, I'm finding.
Yeah, as you're speaking, I'm sensing, how it is, like when stories we've heard about people who have had near-death experiences and come back and they say they went through a life review. It feels like collectively, as we change and move through this major cycle, that we're coming to the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. We're going through this life review, and everything has to come up and be digested, if you will. And then consciousness is collecting data on all that information, so that as it moves forward and creates for itself a new model, if you will, in the human form, it does so through the trial and error knowledge it gained by what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right.
I wonder if you'd speak about Chiron's cycle of 50 years, because I've always wondered about, um, like myself, when I became a grandmother, around 50, um, my grandchildren had the same Chiron wound, right? Because 50-year cycle. So there seems to be something about, a lot of people do become grandparents around 50 and their grandchildren have the same wound. So I wonder if you've ever thought about that or.
Honestly, I had never made that connection exactly. That's interesting, isn't it? Uh, Everyone goes through their Chiron return, as you know, around age 50. And uh, um, it is a rite of passage. Often it can come with a healing crisis. It did for me. I just went through it a couple of years ago, and I got COVID. My dog died. It was, I had lots of things going on that were challenging.
Me too.
Uh huh. Yeah, it would be good to swap notes about that. Um, and but that's normally how Chiron tends to work. It's like an initiation into your. It's like a shamanic initiation. It's like you have to have the healing crisis to humble you enough in a way to but then to access the gift. And for me it's really interesting. I became an astrologer through my Chiron return. I
Mm.
And Chiron rules astrology. uh,
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, and Chiron is on my ascendant, so that means for me it's very central to my character. And then I come out of it and I start running Chiron groups. So for me, literally the journey of the gift was seeing, oh, I actually now can use that wound because I have it so central in my chart. It means I have the capacity to help others with their Chiron wounds. So for me, it was so satisfying actually to put on that course that you were part of for that reason.
Yeah, timing was perfect for me because Chiron was right on my ascendant, conjunct Jupiter. So
That's
there was
right.
yeah, and Pluto on my sun. There's just a lot that made me say yes to that invitation. It just seemed so timely and perfect. And I had been following you and your writing for some time and really appreciate everything you put out and resonate with it. And then when that invitation came, it was an instant yes, like
Hmm.
so synchronistic.
What was your Chiron return like? You mentioned being a grandmother. Was it
Yeah.
challenging?
Well, I was a grandmother before that, and then I became a grandmother again. And I ironically ended up getting a neck injury from a chiropractor. I don't mean to say anything negative about chiropractic, but this particular individual, I sensed when I went there that we had karma. I don't know how, I never really even talk about things like that or sense that, but there was something about it. And I totally felt like a victim at the time, and it was a terrible injury, and it really was uncomfortable for a number of years. But it did take me out of a career that that was expiring, that I probably wouldn't have left because the money was good and that
Mhm.
was my identity. So it rerouted me for sure and slowed me down and um, got me to get back into things that are more body centered in awareness. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, so I became, aware of how to heal my body and help teach others. I had done that for years before that, but I had sort of veered off and became very um, technical and on the internet and building a community online. And then I realized that what this was doing was redirecting me to serve my own community locally. And that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah. So that's classic, I think, too. Chiron return, that there's the healing crisis, and then it puts you in touch with on a healing journey, and then out the other side, you are able to help others in that specific way. And come into your teacher healer role. That's the Chiron path, really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So the fact that it happens at 50, it's just interesting. I think those sorts of transits that there are certain transits in astrology that are specific to each person, depending on where it hits their natal chart. But then there are these um, these transits that are common to everyone, just in terms of the life cycle. So there's the Saturn cycle, the Saturn return at 28, 29 for everybody. That is like the initiation point into adulthood, really. And then the second Saturn return in the late 50s, which is like the entry point into elderhood, really. And there's the Uranus cycle, where you have the sort of midlife crisis transit in the early 40s, is the Uranus opposition. And then the Uranus return at 84 is, in a sense, a life cycle, a full life cycle. And then the Chiron one, just to keep it simple here, the Chiron return at age 50, I just think it says something interesting about the path of a soul, that we all have that. And we all go through, we all integrate Chiron in some way in a lifetime. And to do it consciously, then is the way to fully take advantage of those gifts consciously, rather than just be at the mercy of that archetype, which can create sort of these lifetimes of avoidance if we don't look at that fully.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm seeing some parallels in some other systems I've studied, and I'm thinking how, if we get so identified as a victim and with the story of the wound, it seems like that Chiron return has to be more shocking and intense to get us to see and get some space and distance on the wound and the story to see what is actually wanting to emerge, right? Like something new is wanting to be brought forward and given to the world. It's not like it belongs to us, it belongs to humanity. And so it is our life and our human experience that will attract to us whatever's needed to crack us open in order for that gift to be recognized, or at least sensed, and create an environment around until we can get clear about it. And I think it takes a whole lifetime to get really clear, because it's always unfolding and evolving like a fractal, right? It just keeps unwinding, and more information. We start to get, like you, I was really listening to you talk about that aha moment when you realize that conjunction that you have on the ascendant, and how you thought, oh, I'm here to help others with this. And it just landed so like strong and true for you, and with so much clarity, that you took action on it. You got a great response, and you've been launched. It's been like it's
Great. And it was very interesting with that, because it felt to me like it was one of the first things I've done where the feeling that I had when I put out that offer, and then when I got the response back, was being, how do I describe this? As if I was exactly on the ground. I wasn't lifted off the ground at all. Like sometimes when I've offered things in the past, I've gotten maybe a little caught up with trying to, I don't know, oversell it a bit or meet the grade or that sort of thing. This one felt like, this is just me speaking to you, and or sort to the people who I sent the thing to, and so there's this very interesting way, I think, where real success, I think it has to be this way where you you can metabolize it if it's real. If you're on the ground and the offer you put out is met by the energy that comes back, then something real lands in you. Like, oh, I can stand in this for real. You could have different kinds of success that doesn't fully land in your identity because you might be faking it on some level. You might be overreaching on some level. You might be hiding something on some level. You still can do things and get things, but in terms of that more true feeling of um, I have this to give, and it it's another level of living for real rather than
Mhm.
living some kind of egocentric life. It's entering into your real life. That's how I've been experiencing it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a pure authenticity. It's I, I really, one of the reasons I invited you here is because I wanted to confirm, not that you need it, but I felt like I watched you go through this process and what you shared so authentically, and that not only did you get enough for one group, you had enough for two groups, which is the universe saying double thumbs up, like you're going in the right direction.
Right.
And I thought, well, I also want to confirm that direction for you and share
Yeah.
my experience of how helpful it was to be held in that container and to listen to other people share their experience of their dancing with their Chiron wound and turning towards it instead of away from it. And just seeing the breakthroughs in people was, when we do this in a collective container, even though it was a small group, there's just certain things you can't get at on your own, and you have to be part of a larger field with other perspectives that when shared, it can activate something dormant in you, and you can see it for the first time. And once you see it, you can't unsee it, and it
Yeah.
takes its own, direction.
Well, thanks. I feel that confirmation or that, and as you're saying that, I feel the my excitement coming forward with all this because um I what does bring me passion is this way of working with people that we did in that group, where uh, what 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 I've been given, this is my Chiron gift, is this way of blending our shared essence into a whole that creates this very coherent healing space that holds us all. And how I think of it is that we together create this kind of energetic portal that then allows these much bigger healing energies to hold us and to flow through. So, as you know, we open together to allow the deeper healing energies of the earth and the cosmos and some of these bigger energies to be holding us. And so to me, that's where the magic is. That's what I love. And it's not so much that I'm holding everyone. We are create this
Right.
conduit, and we are held in that healing space. And then literally magic happens. I think that it becomes this uh safe holding where to the psyche there's this feeling that it is safe for me to go there now. It is safe for, say, some of those protective parts to relax, and then you can make contact with the wound itself, and it's that's where the transformation happens, when the consciousness meets that.
Mhm.
And 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 there are a few things more satisfying for me than to be in that space.
Yeah, and you do it so well. And for my sense was it wasn't just the safety on the container, even though that was definitely prevalent. It was the knowing that it was time because the invitation came, right? And and it was like consciousness, the bigger self saying, it's time for this, and here I brought you this help,
Mm.
like like you can say no, and like you said, avoid your wound and turn away from it and not deal with it. But when certain things present themselves in the way they did in that situation, it was just so obvious that there was another, it was me, my intelligence, but not limited to the individual personality.
Yeah.
And like you said, when consciousness is um, wanting to expand through form and through our lives individually, and it bumps up against these blocks, and it's time for those blocks to dissolve like a membrane so something new can hatch, then if we can position ourselves there with awareness and be a witness to consciousness self-reflecting on itself as it expands through limitation, there's not a better seat in the house in life than that place. And it feels like in that moment you're the benefactor of having friends in high places.
Yeah. 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 Well, it feels like in that moment you come really close to that unfolding edge of reality, that
Right.
unfolding edge of consciousness, and and so you're joining with this living process, and and as I was saying earlier, we were doing that in this cosmic window with the Jupiter Chiron transit. So we did have those forces working with us. So that wasn't just something we made up. That was confirmed.
Yeah, it was a recognition of support, the right support at the right time. And then you acted on it and you got the validation from the physical reality of people saying yes, and the doubling, the group, which is exponential. And I even felt, the support of the other group that I wasn't part of, but
Yeah.
that we were traveling together, and whatever benefits and breakthroughs were happening there were simultaneously benefiting our group and likewise. So yeah, this thinking in these terms of energy and expansion, and that it's not about a solo journey anymore, right? I mean, it never was, but it was for consciousness to pour itself into form and have a unique experience of itself through each form. But now it feels like where it likes to hang out is where these forms that it's experiencing itself through are exchanging information, like
Mhm.
right now. There's one consciousness here in two different forms exchanging information at a level of awareness that consciousness is the one doing all this. There's something about that.
Well, this is part of the new Aquarian consciousness coming in as well, is the the Piscean archetype that we've has been the dominant energy for the last 2000 years, is organized more around the concept of transcendence. And so it's been within the age of Pisces. That's just how it works, is there's and and so with that, it is more of this vertical. It's like people orienting toward the transcendent, and it created a bit more of these hierarchical
Mhm.
forms in everything. But with a including religion and spiritual practice, was more oriented towards attaining to that transcendental awareness. But we are now entering to the Aquarian energy, which has more of this spirit of equality and sovereign individuals accessing their own knowledge, and then sharing it in these um, distributed networks, these networks. And so but to me, this is where the creativity is, and this is where the fun is the emergence of these forms. And I'm seeing it in many different spiritual groups now are going more and more in that direction, where I think it's very exciting. It's like there are quantum leaps, I think, now coming online as we discover the power of collective spiritual intelligence to um, bring in a whole other dimension for transformation. It's not just you on your own doing your own work, or even just you and your teacher. There's more and more ways of consciously harnessing that power of the coherent group to
Mhm.
lift each other up. And I know, I have a feeling it's we're just beginning with that, and who knows where we're going to go with that.
Yeah, it reminds me of you and I are both married, and how my marriage is a vehicle for like my individual body is a vehicle for consciousness that I'm physically anchoring an energy field on this planet, right?
Mm.
And I, as an individual, have certain capacities, but in the marriage my husband has strengths that I don't, and vice versa. And so in the marriage is a vehicle for consciousness that has expanded its capacity to move through our lives in a way that it couldn't without that.
Yeah.
And then that's going to the next level of community, where I host different groups as well. And that becomes another vehicle. And so it's multiple bodies coming together in resonance creates a vehicle that gives consciousness a way to transport itself, if you will, to different experiences it can't have in.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
well said. That's how I think of it. Yeah. It's like when we come into resonance, just like you're saying with your marriage, like some, for instance, we've created that field of compassion. Um, some people will have a natural compassion for certain types of other people because of their life experience, and but they might be blocked more, might be harder to find compassion for other types because of wounding or just not having the same life experience. But if you get 100 people together and we blend our compassion together, the the where someone is weak, someone else is really strong there. And so the kind of, what can we hold together if you have 100 people coming into coherent, deep compassion? What can you hold with that? And see, that may be the segue into my passion about collective healing, because this has been always my intuition with this work. Is it's it's powerful. It's maybe even next level to apply for our own personal healing process. But where I feel it has tremendous potential is in holding collective wounds. So some of these issues, that these very, very thorny issues that are up in the culture right now around racism and sexism and disconnect from the earth, all these collective traumas that we've inherited, or trauma from war, or, all this sort of past huge intergenerational trauma. What I know is that these collective fields have the capacity to hold those wounds, and and it's very difficult, and maybe even not appropriate for individuals to try to take on the burden of healing those wounds, because it's too much for an individual. But we can come together and create these spaces where that field can hold a lot, and it can it can direct that healing capacity to those very wounds. And that's the deep calling for me with that work.
Mm. Yeah, so it is exponential. It's big, to wrap your mind around that. But I agree. It feels really true. And I want to say, when I work with individuals, my sense is that I'm not trying to liberate the individual as much as I am trying. Well, I'm not even trying anything. It's like what consciousness is doing through me is seeking to create more bandwidth through the individual for itself. And it's by pointing out what's in the way of that, right? By pointing out, like when I listen to the language, I can hear limitations and programs that are running in the consciousness, that the perspectives aren't allowing expansion. It's not a creative environment. And consciousness is, I think this is true for all of us, and I'm just witnessing it in myself and my own work when I'm having a conversation with someone and we're looking at their different charts and different perspectives, is to, like I said, give more bandwidth for consciousness to expand. And so I think, to make the point here with Chiron, that the ultimate reason to turn towards the wound is because embedded in that wound is a gift. It is there's a creativity there that the world needs. And to not give it is kind of a selfish act, right? To not be willing to turn towards a wound and feel discomfort because we don't want to have to face it is denying the rest of ourselves as consciousness and form something that could be of value.
Yeah. Well, I think what you're saying, there's this really important motivation for doing the healing work that can be a little underemphasized in a lot of approaches, because so much focus tends to be on, how is it going to help you, and how are you going to, what's it going to do for you to heal and to and there can be, in many therapeutic, spiritual, new age approaches, if when the practices themselves are only ever focused on our own body mind, there's a certain amount of that is necessary to become self-aware, right? Like if we're acting out unconsciously, you do need to track, well, where is that coming from, or what am I doing actually? So it's a necessary step. But if that's the only thing that we ever do, where our consciousness keeps turning in on ourselves over and over and over, it can itself become, it can reinforce that focus on the self, which is why spiritual people are often accused of navel gazing, and they become self-absorbed. And
which is the wound in a way. Sorry to interrupt, but it's the wound to identify with the self. That is in itself a wound, because you're cutting yourself off from the bigger.
Yeah. So it can be this really important step where you recognize that, that how is my healing serving something much bigger, and feeling that motivation for, how can I be of that greater service, is just often the crucial thing that's needed to cut through some of those self loops. And then, because just even energetically, the energy needs to flow. It needs, if it's just sort of circulating within, that can get unhealthy at some point, but it needs to flow out as well as in.
And for me, it helps to just think of it that it's I'm not the doer, it's getting done through me. Something is unfolding through me. There's a creative movement unfolding here. And also, like, things aren't happening to me, they're happening through me, to really shift our perspective from looking to the outside and to the identity for evidence or validation or results is backwards in a way, because we want to look at the energy, like what is, it's moving this way, if you will, or this way, it's moving probably always, but I don't know how to say what I want to say, but it's really a perspective shift in being more internally referenced versus externally referenced in terms of what's unfolding here, and not internally in a sense of about me, but what is creating through here, what is unfolding here, and how can I create the right environment to support it, to partner with it, as the personality self. How can I leverage
Yeah. What I hear you saying in that is like honoring and tracking the quality of the energy as it's rather than the external indicators necessarily. It's like, okay, no, I want to be true to that inspiration or that quality of energy that is that feels authentic or feels like it's in alignment with some higher guidance, and that's my measure of success, or that's rather than
mm-hmm.
that. That's what I resonate with.
Yeah, thank you. And it goes back to what you said about when you put out the clarion call for the Chiron group, that it wasn't that you were trying to use the right words to sell it. It's coming from a different place, that offer. And it's so common in our culture with creativity to instead of allow it to be raw and authentic, we package it in a way that we think it will sell, or it will be approved, or it will be accepted, and then everything gets homogenized and things all start looking the same.
Yeah.
To let what's unfolding not have all these filters, even though the filters are there, we want to question them. Is it necessary? Does it need hype? Because
Yeah.
based on how you package it, if you will, that's what it's going to attract. So if you package it with hype, you're going to attract people that want hype. And
Exactly.
so,
That's
yeah.
what I was saying before, is that you package something with hype, then you're already a little bit off the ground. And yes, you might get people, but they're they're responding to some of the hype, and so then you can feel that you're not, maybe you can't authentically deliver on all of that, and it just sets up this unbalanced sort of way of moving. And I think this is a deep lifelong journey. I think we're all trying to figure this out, how to firstly find what is your ground, what is your real offering, that is your real calling, and then how do you interface with this world, which has I mean, you do have to learn some skills about how it works to interface with it, but then I mean, this is what Kate and I are trying at the moment so much, is to be yes, really new, creative, authentic in how we're talking about what we're doing. And I do think that many people, in any case, especially in this sort of work, are very these days wary of anything that looks like hype. Uh, it's just that just doesn't, that's not going to cut it. I think we want more and more realness to come into these sorts of offerings, and for that it means you have to be very creative. It actually takes quite a lot of attention to bring through something creative rather than rote.
Yeah, and obviously it's what the world needs, because the same old isn't working.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it does
Yeah.
take
And I think this is the exciting aspect of the moment where we we are at the birth of something amazing, even though we're also at the death of something. So there's a lot that's flooding our consciousness about the alarming aspect of the death, but there is the power of the birth, and I think that's going to come more and more. And with that brings um, just birth means we haven't seen it before, so there's nothing like aligning yourself with that absolutely new unfolding energy as it's coming in. Because I mean, think of the power of birth, and um, I do think that we are going to live through a time soon when even um, despite um, all of the darkness that is certainly playing out, that I do think it's ultimately a prelude for a birth moment, and um, uh, maybe we can't say too much about that because we don't really know it yet. But um, I can, I sense some sort of big expansion that's on the way.
Yeah, you're right. We can't know for sure, but we can sense that, the nature of consciousness and the universe is to expand. And that's what it's doing all the time, expanding. And then it's expanding through form that doesn't expand, but our energy expands, our field expands. And I think it's just seeking, like I believe it was David Bohm who said consciousness is seeking a form that allows its fullest expression. So
Mm.
ultimately, the direction has to be towards more freedom for consciousness
Mm-hmm.
through form. And so the limitations that um, are imposed on that expansion are what's getting challenged. All the current systems and red tape that were structures that served us to a certain point are now choking the creativity out of.
Totally.
So
Oh,
that's what's getting the pressure. You can see it busting at the seams because
yeah.
it's it's holding on to something that is no longer um, of the vehicle for consciousness is being upgraded, and systems that aren't going in that direction are collapsing.
That's what I say, and I think they're squeezing the creative energy out of those systems, so then it has to move into new forms.
Yeah.
And and I also see that many of those new forms are group forms. These where, um,
Virtual.
yeah, and but people voluntarily coming together to co-create these fields of group consciousness that are, I feel like it's almost like new organisms, as if, back in evolution, at a certain point, we didn't have multi-celled organisms. We just had single cells. And we're moving a lot at the moment from the individual consciousness, the age of the individual, to this more group consciousness, um, which has a shadow side. Group consciousness, it can become herd thinking in a more lower form, but the higher form is these voluntary um, connections between sovereign individuals, people who have their sovereignty and have their autonomy, but choose to come together to um, mix our collective creative intelligence and and then channel, in a sense, these higher level solutions. And I think that's what's coming. I think that's what's on the way.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's consciousness is um, the one having an experience of itself through these forms. So it is gathering itself in particular configurations or constellations or organisms and experiencing something and creating something, and then without the emotional attachments and entanglements that we've had in the past as a species that we had to procreate, those individuals can disperse and then become part of other organisms and create something new. And that I see that kind of freedom is the direction. And also with AI, right? It's not like we're creating anything. It's getting created through us. Like we as individuals aren't creating it. It's getting created through us. And that to, get a sense of what is this consciousness that's creating and what direction is it going, and to be riding the crest of that wave, as you said, right there in that sweet spot, is to be fully alive and present. And in that moment, in that space, you can be clearer about where to be, when, and with who, to be in service, to serve, and to serve that consciousness.
Yeah. As you're speaking, it's making me think that I think another aspect of being alive at the moment that is really interesting and exciting is all of these old categories seem to be breaking down. These certainties that we've had about ourselves, left and right, and masculine, feminine, and I feel us sort of entering into this space more and more of not knowing, because what all of these old assumptions that we have had, they're almost like they're liquefying before our eyes. And that's disconcerting in many ways, but it's very creative. It's to put us into this space where, if we're honest, if we're really tracking things, I think there can be the sense, geez, I just don't even know anymore about X or Y, because and but in that space, the thing that can emerge is brand new, and that's where I think we need to go. So I mean, I definitely feel this politically at the moment is I think a lot of people are going through deep shifts because the trajectories that we've been on, we might have identified on one side or another, but it's not going in just this linear trajectory where I see it all sort of dissolving. It's all we're not just taking one linear step from here to there. We're entering into a much more profound transformation, and to be willing to not know, I think at the moment, is a healthy place to be, and that's how we can remain most open to that creative energy that's trying to move through us.
Thank you. Wonderful. It reminds me of that quote by Carl Sagan: somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known.
Yeah.
And it's creating the right conditions for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate everything you've shared today, and who you are, and your service and dedication to helping people on their journey. I'd love to give you an opportunity to share your website and anything you'd like people to know about you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for the conversation, Cyndi. It's been lovely just to be in the space with you. And so my website is earthastrology.one, earthastrology.one. And what I'm excited about at the moment, Kate and I, my wife and partner, just have started this new program we call Bloom, And this does feel very fresh. This is something that has emerged out of that not knowing space. And what we're doing with Bloom, it's a 12-month process. And we really are thinking of it as a process, not a program. It's an unfolding. And the basic idea is that each month, the members of the program, I mean, the backbone of the program is this monthly Zoom call that we'll do to come into tune with the archetypal energies of that moment. So we're going to be doing just sort of the base notes of the seasons. We started with Aries and we're now in Taurus. And so there'll be like a deep transmission where the group will come into tune with that energy. And what we're trying to create is this slipstream where participants who are carrying codes of this new Aquarian age can feel that they're coming more and more into resonance with these natural cycles and rhythms, and that their projects can more and more feel in that deep alignment. Because when that happens, it feels like you have the whole cosmos behind you. You become more and more an expression of that. And so we're creating this container where people who are in it can really feel on that deep level that they're coming into that flow of the natural rhythms and cycles. And there's many more details to the program, but it's this living call and response between what we're putting out and what the participants are putting in, as we try to lift each other together and activate each other's codes that we're carrying for the new era. So that's, if anyone is interested, we're still open for the next month, and they'll find that on the website.
Wonderful. Yeah. I liked what you said about the call and response, because it feels like not only are you doing a call and response with your community, but you're doing a call and response with the cosmos, right? With the position of the planets in each month as the sun enters a new sign. There's a call and response to those energies to come and be part of that.
It is. That's what's happening. The gods and the goddesses are coming to play. That's what we feel. It's pretty cool.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much again, David, and all of you for tuning in. We appreciate your time and attention. And yeah, this was really fantastic. I'd love to do it again sometime. We'll stay in touch about that.
Sounds great, Cyndi. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for this.
You're very welcome. Bye, everyone.